Hello everybody. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think about food systems and then explain why they're very difficult to change. So starting off, why think about food systems? Well, here is my cartoon of the food system. That food is produced over here. It impacts upon the rural environment and the social environment in the countryside. That produces food that goes into some supply chain. It ends up in some sort of supermarket. We choose it, and it impacts on our nutrition, health and well-being. But the thing about this as a system is that the outcomes from the system, whether it is environmental damage or whether it is food security, literally depends on the decisions of millions upon millions of different actors, farmers and consumers and politicians and market actors and so on. That's the first point. There is no central brain that governs it, that tells it what to do. They respond, individual actors respond to the conditions at the time, the food environment or the market prices or whatever it might be. The second thing is that this is a complex food system, and broadly our policy and thinking about food has kind of assumed that there is a close mapping, that farming makes food, and if we regulate farming, then that will provide the food that we need. But clearly, if you want to focus on nutrition, health and well-being, it's not really sensible in some way to focus on telling farmers how to farm. The main reason, though, for thinking about the food as a system is illustrated by this august gentleman here, who is William Stanley Jevons, who was a Victorian economist. Jevons pointed out that if you made coal-fired power stations more efficient, you would expect to use less coal. But what happened, of course, is you made power stations more efficient. That meant that energy became cheaper and more available, and that meant that the demand for energy went up, so you ended up using more coal. And what has been the history of the last 60 years of food system design, market design, is that we have made food ever cheaper, ever more available. And as a result, we have started to consume more and more because it's cheaper, it's rational to waste it. And the political dialogue is very tightly bound between the production of food, the price of food, and the ability to consume more food, all driving the economy and contributing to economic growth. And as a result, the food system in some way behaves in a strange, irrational way these days. So we've made, through intensive agriculture, we've made grain prices so cheap, it's now economically efficient to feed grain to livestock. And across the EU, now over 60% of grain is livestock feed. And that makes animal-sourced foods, meat, cheaper. So we all eat much more meat. And because we're eating more meat, we're demanding more meat. The livestock herd increases, and the greenhouse gases that come from having very large numbers of cows around increases. So the more we produce food, the more we demand food, and the more the environmental impact grows, and the more our health impact grows, because food is ever cheaper, and therefore we eat more and more of it, and the wrong sort of thing. And our current system, as I mentioned, has been designed over 60 odd years, and it is locked in and very difficult to change. And I'm going to go through in a quick way why it's locked in and identify three major lock-ins. The first is what I call the cheaper food paradigm, and this is what I was mentioning in the previous slide, that government sees the relationship between consumption growth as a driver of economic growth. So the more food is cheaper, the more you can buy more food, and the more also that you can save money and spend it on other things. So cheaper food is a good thing from an economic growth perspective. The second part of this ideological thinking is that the markets are the driver of solutions, and therefore the best way to create a situation where everybody has access to the food they need is just to leave it to the market. And that means that also implicit in political thinking is that encouraging you to eat in a certain way as a citizen is not part of the role of government. And I call this the cheaper food paradigm. The consequence of this is that policies over the years have created a market through taking the rules away, burning the red tape, through liberalising markets, so trade, so that we can buy food from anywhere in the world and sell our food anywhere in the world, through thinking that cheaper food is a good thing and driving efficiency through scale, and through targeting our support at the state level to farmers and production systems that grow things that can be easily sold overseas, the globally important commodities. And as a result of that, this has led to a food system which is dominated by ultra-processed foods, which are made from the constituents that are grown at intensity and scale: wheat, rice, maize, palm oil, sugar, and so on. Only 8 crops are responsible for about 2/3 of the world's calories. These goods are produced intensively and at scale and into the ultra-processed foods that increasingly everybody in the world is eating. Not incorporated in the price of food is the external costs that come from either eating food and driving ill health, or the environmental costs. And so we have a food system which is incentivizing the production, a market system that is incentivizing the production of things that we consume and we waste, but those costs are not part of the price not incorporated into the market. By stimulating this market through deregulating and liberalising, etc., we have also created the situation where there is huge market concentration. A relatively small number of companies have huge market power and drive the system in the way that is best from their economic growth perspective. And it's also led to the situation where we have designed this system, we've invested heavily in it, huge amounts of infrastructure in the right sorts of ways, lots of intellectual property protection, etc., that the way business is conducted, it's very difficult to change now. So much money has been spent that we have got this huge path dependency that we can't just easily switch to farming in a different way and manufacturing food in a different way. And all of that together means that transformative change is perceived by business and is perceived by politicians as prohibitively challenging politically and economically. And just to illustrate the concentration in the food system, this is a lovely diagram from the Dutch food, of the Dutch food system from about 10 years ago. 65,000 farmers, 17 million eaters, 7 million shoppers, but only 5 big companies in the middle, the grain shippers, the big food companies, and so on. Huge amount of market power, and they make their profit from the system staying the way that it is. So we've got this locked-in food system. What will determine what the future looks like? And if you look across and talk to people, there are a huge number of different views about this is a driverless tractor, a drone, robots. This is the world's largest pig farm, 60-odd stories in somewhere in China, world's largest indoor agriculture greenhouse thing. And yet you have people talking about regenerative agriculture, eating whole foods rather than eating ultra-processed foods. Who gets to choose what the future is? Well, one often hears, oh, it's the job of the market, it's the job of the food companies, or it's the job of politicians, or even worse, it's the job of citizens to buy things in different ways. And in actual fact, it's got to be the job of all of them working together, and no change will come about unless everybody is willing to change. So politicians, for example, will not want to regulate the food system to make it healthier and more sustainable until citizens say, we'll give you your vote if you do that. And if we say we won't, then they will say they won't, and the markets will say no one cares, we'll carry on as we are. And there are different communities, investors and farmers, but those are relatively small compared to these 3 main constituencies, and they are the ones that have to get aligned. So what can create change? There are a huge number of things that can be done that will make the food system better, and these involve changing the regulation building market transparency, creating the enabling conditions for politicians to want to change things in a significant way. And I'm often asked, what can citizens do to effect change? And the answer is, yes, you can change your buying behaviour for the better. You can use that to send a market signal. But in reality, the biggest change will happen when you, your friends, your families, your communities say to politicians, we want change, and be brave, politician, change the market to deliver better food, more availably, more affordably for me, and more sustainably produced. So in the long run, the food system that we all rely on is actually better for me, better for people as a whole, and better for the planet. Thank you very much.